Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. 4 years ago, my wife Margaret and I, David, were deeply immersed in the world of art. It was a shared passion that united us, and as I like to think, we approached it with sincerity, without any pretentiousness. We loved art in all its forms and styles. Anything that had artistic significance caught our interest. Our home was a gallery in itself, filled with the best pieces we could afford, and we often visited art galleries and museums, at least once a month, sometimes more frequently. We were regular members of 2 local galleries, attending every exhibition, opening, and art evening. Sometimes we even traveled to larger cities to see special exhibits. Over the 20 years of our marriage, we had built a close circle of friends who shared our passion for art, though of course, we had friends with other interests as well. But it was with this group of art lovers that we felt the strongest bond. However, there was one person in our circle that neither Margaret nor I particularly enjoyed spending time with: Lisa, the second wife of our friend Tom. For Tom's sake, I tried to get along with her, but it wasn't easy. Lisa seemed indifferent to the kind of art we all cherished. She often made dismissive comments about the classics, which left us puzzled. We couldn't understand how Tom tolerated her obvious lack of taste. But there was one question none of us dared to ask. Why did Tom marry her? Lisa, undoubtedly attractive, had a certain charm that was hard to ignore, like a gentle breeze on a cold day. She carried herself with understated elegance, although by the time the events of this story took place, it was clear that Tom's patience with her superficiality had worn thin, despite her outward appeal. His public remarks toward her were becoming more frequent and awkward, and I often had to step in to smooth things over. As a professional mediator, I prided myself on being able to resolve conflicts, even in personal situations. In the case of Tom and Lisa, I became something of a peacemaker, and although my efforts always helped to diffuse the tension, neither of them ever expressed gratitude for it. Fortunately, our art-loving friends appreciated my attempts to keep the peace. Despite my annoyance with Lisa, I tried to remain polite, and she reciprocated in the rare moments we interacted directly. By the time this incident occurred, I had known Lisa for about 4 years. The largest gallery in our town was preparing to celebrate its 50th anniversary with a major exhibition of paintings and rare lithographs, including one of its most famous works. This event promised to be the highlight of the year, with fantastic food and drinks, as always, and I was eagerly anticipating it. However, a week before the event, Margaret received an unexpected call from Lisa, who sounded unusually excited. It turned out that Tom had been called away on a business trip. The event was scheduled for Wednesday evening, and for reasons unknown to us, Lisa was very eager to attend. During the conversation, Lisa unexpectedly confessed, "I know most of your group probably finds me a bit boring, but I'm really trying to fit in. You and David have always been the most understanding. Can I come with you?" Margaret, a little taken aback, reluctantly agreed, and Lisa seemed thrilled with the invitation. Later, Margaret recounted the conversation to me with a hint of reluctance in her voice. "Lisa called. Tom won't be in town for the anniversary celebration, and she asked if she could come with us." I groaned. "Well, I couldn't say no, could I?" I muttered. "Great. I'll need a stiff drink or maybe some pills to get through that evening. Maybe both." Margaret laughed. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. She seemed to be genuinely trying. She wants to fit in with our group and learn more about art." "Maybe we should take her under our wing and give her an art course," I said with a smirk. Margaret playfully nudged me. "Behave yourself." I gradually resigned myself to the idea that Margaret and I would be responsible for entertaining Lisa throughout the evening. But a few days before the event, Margaret surprised me again. "David, dear," she began in that sweet tone that always preceded bad news. "What now?" I asked, bracing for the worst. "You know how much I've been looking forward to the anniversary celebration," she began. "But something urgent has come up at work. If I want to advance in my career, I'll have to leave on Wednesday morning and won't return until late Friday night." "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tracing gentle patterns on my chest with her fingers. The first thought that crossed my mind, one I couldn't suppress, was a question I had asked before. Is John Miller going on this trip? Without hesitation, I asked again, Is John going? I couldn't hide my irritation. Yes, along with 2 other colleagues, she replied, her voice carrying a slight defensive note. She tried to lighten the mood by switching to a playful tone. Why do you always get worked up over him? But her attempt to joke fell flat. Because, I responded firmly, he's always hovering around you, and honestly, I don't trust him. I wanted to believe I was exaggerating, but deep down I wasn't so sure. Oh, David, Margaret sighed, clearly tired. You're misunderstanding everything. Really? I shot back, not believing her. Then why does he always try to dance with you during every company event? And what about that night we ran into him and his supposed girlfriend at the club? How could he have known we'd be there? My memories resurfaced, and my irritation grew. We've already discussed this, she replied, her voice now tinged with irritation as well. It was a coincidence. Besides, he dances with other women too. Just not slow dances, she added, as if that somehow made things better. And what about his comment the other time? Do you remember when I said you only dance slow dances with me? I reminded her, the moment still fresh in my mind. He was joking, she brushed it off as if it didn't matter. I didn't find it funny at all, I retorted sharply, feeling my frustration build. Oh, sweetheart, she said softly, trying to soothe me. Don't be jealous. You know you're much more attractive than him. She wasn't wrong. I knew I looked better than John, and I was confident I could handle him if it ever came to that. But appearance didn't always matter to women, especially not to Margaret. Her previous serious boyfriend, before we got married, looked a lot like John, and she had been madly in love with him until he messed everything up. Still feeling uneasy, I asked, Do you really need to go on this trip? Yes, darling, I do, she replied in a gentle voice, her hand trailing across my chest again. If you don't believe me, you can ask Brad. Brad, her boss, was always straightforward, and I knew he wouldn't sugarcoat the truth. I muttered something, still not fully satisfied with the answer, but Margaret wrapped her arms around me, and that usually calmed me down. However, this time a new question surfaced. Gently pulling away to look into her eyes, I asked, Are you going to tell Lisa she's not coming with us since you won't be there? Margaret looked puzzled. Why would I do that? You're still going, right? She can go with you. I groaned in frustration. I was counting on you to help me handle her endless questions and strange behavior. Now I have to deal with it on my own. Our friends will be there, she said patiently. Just be kind, David. She's really trying to fit in. It might even be fun. Yeah, sure, I muttered, unconvinced. You'll probably just sit there all night with a drink, she teased, chuckling softly. Then she started massaging my shoulders and added, Come on, let me help you relax. I realized she was trying to smooth things over, so I decided to play along. Soon enough, we both relaxed, and I lifted her into my arms and carried her to the shower, where we splashed and laughed, temporarily forgetting the tension that lingered between us. Afterward, we went to bed. Still, I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. The thought of her going on that trip with John bothered me deeply, and the idea of dealing with Lisa without Margaret's help wasn't appealing either. Even though our friends would be there, I doubted they'd be of much assistance. My mind kept spinning until I finally drifted into a restless sleep. 2 days later, the unease became too much to ignore, so I called Brad. We had a decent relationship. We'd worked together a few times and even played tennis as doubles partners. So I tried to keep the conversation light. I started by asking about tickets for an upcoming tennis match before bringing up what was really on my mind. Brad confirmed that Margaret was indeed supposed to go on the trip. But one thing he said shocked me. Only she and John were going. No other colleagues. Brad mentioned that the final decision had been made recently, so Margaret might not have known about the change at first. But even so, the news left me feeling uneasy. That night, before her departure, I made sure Margaret was completely exhausted, hoping it would help both of us, especially me, sleep better. The next morning, she voiced a few minor complaints, though they came across as more playful than serious. Her tone reassured me, and I let go of my worries about her spending 2 nights alone with John. But soon, another dilemma arose. I had to take Lisa to the gala myself. I called her around noon on Wednesday, partly hoping to find an excuse to avoid it, despite having already promised to go. However, when she answered, her enthusiasm made it clear that canceling would make me feel like a real jerk. "I can't wait to see the exhibit with someone who doesn't constantly criticize me like Tom does," she exclaimed excitedly at one point. I mentally prepared for a potentially awkward evening, but I promised myself that I would do my best to make it enjoyable. For the event, I dressed in a formal suit, and when I arrived to pick her up, I was wearing a tuxedo. When Lisa stepped out, she wore a stunning, strapless, sleeveless, floor-length electric blue gown. The dress revealed her shoulders, and a daring slit on the left side reached nearly to her thigh. She completed the look with a sapphire necklace and matching bracelet, adding elegance to her appearance. "You look amazing," I genuinely admired, helping her drape a pashmina over her shoulders before we left. "Thanks, and you're the most elegant penguin I've ever seen," she teased with a smile. Our conversation on the way to the exhibit was a bit awkward, but once we arrived, grabbed oysters, shrimp, vegetables, and drank 2 glasses of wine each, the tension began to ease. With the wine, the conversation flowed much more naturally. As we wandered through the exhibit, Lisa kept asking questions and sharing her impressions. It was clear that the early works didn't particularly impress her. You can see his attention to detail here, which evolved over time into the distinctive biomorphic shapes he became known for. Lisa studied a painting closely, finishing her second glass of white wine, and then smirked. "Honestly, this looks like a bad still life." She laughed. "I'll need another glass if the rest are like this," she joked, holding out her empty glass. Smiling at her remark, I went to get another drink, especially since I wasn't much of a fan of oysters myself. "Thank you, David," she said, taking the glass, her fingers briefly brushing mine. "There's a lot to take in here. I don't always understand why everything is painted like this," she admitted. "Even the most seasoned art lovers struggle sometimes," I reassured her with a smile. In this piece, he uses a monochromatic background to emphasize the simple forms and lines. It creates the feeling of a complex constellation in the night sky. Some say this chaotic image reflects emotional turmoil. "Wow," Lisa giggled. After a short pause, reflecting on what I had said, she added, "I think I get it now. Thank you, David. You're a genius." I laughed. "I'll take the genius title, but let's not go overboard with the compliments," I joked. In response, she hugged me warmly and sincerely. To my surprise, I actually began to enjoy leading her through the exhibit. Her comments weren't silly or inappropriate. On the contrary, they were either funny or insightful, and sometimes even surprisingly accurate, especially considering it was already her 4th glass of wine. She saved her wittiest comment for last when we approached a piece called Mother. After a few minutes of contemplation, she finished her wine and asked, "Is this supposed to be a woman?" "Yes, it is," I replied with a smile. "It's a highly abstracted image, reduced to its essence." "Well," she smirked, "she's got a nice chest, though she could definitely use a sandwich." Chuckling, she added, "Honestly, I have art at home that's much more appealing." "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder," I responded with a smile. "True," she said with a sly smile, "but I guarantee the artwork in my house will impress you far more than anything you've seen here tonight." We were mingling with our friends, and the conversations turned out to be surprisingly engaging. Liza often chimed in, cleverly picking up on my remarks, occasionally giving me a playful glance as she repeated something I had said. By 11, people began to leave. Liza excused herself to freshen up, and I seized the moment to retreat to a quiet corner and discreetly call Margaret. Using a phone in the gallery wasn't entirely allowed, so I had to be cautious. I dialed her number, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a brief message, mentioning that the evening was going better than expected, and asked her to call me back when she could. On the way home, it became clear that Liza had drunk a little more than she should have, though she still maintained her elegance. During the ride, Liza said something that completely caught me off guard. "David, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I want to thank you. Whenever Tom made his awkward comments, you always found a way to get me out of those uncomfortable situations. I really appreciate it." She gently squeezed my hand, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I hope I've been able to help," I replied, a bit surprised by her candidness. She continued, her tone still soft but now more profound. "And thank you for being so kind to me today. I'm sure you dreaded this evening, but I hope it wasn't as bad as you expected." I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Actually, I had a good time tonight. I hope you did too." At that moment, the headlights of a passing car illuminated her blue eyes and the sapphire necklace around her neck, making them sparkle. "I had a wonderful time," she said, flashing me a dazzling smile. When we arrived at her house, she took my hand and casually asked, "Would you like to see my paintings? I think many would agree they deserve more admiration than the ones at the exhibition." It was a little past 11, and knowing I hadn't planned on sleeping until midnight, I said, "Sure, I'd be interested." I quickly got out of the car, walked around to her side, and opened the door, offering my hand to help her out. The slit in her dress shifted, revealing more of her left thigh than I had noticed before, and it immediately caught my attention. Liza fumbled with her keys, and I helped her unlock the door. Once inside, she closed the curtains and smiled. "Give me a minute before I show you the art I'm so proud of." "Would you like a drink?" she asked with a playful tone. "I think I've had enough for tonight," I replied. "I should probably head home." "Don't worry. By the time you leave, you'll be completely sober," she winked. "But if you change your mind, the bar is over there," she added, pointing to a small nook between the living room and the kitchen. Then she disappeared into another part of the house, leaving me alone. I took the opportunity to look at the paintings on the walls. After a few minutes, I thought about calling Margaret again, but her phone still didn't answer. I left another brief message, asking her to call me back, though a slight sense of unease began to creep in. Trying to shake it off, I continued to look at the artwork. I had only been in Tom and Liza's house once before, back when he was still married to his first wife. The art had changed since then. Some of the pieces were quite good, though none of them captivated me as much as Liza had claimed. I wondered if she had gone to retrieve something special from the bedroom as I scanned the room. Suddenly, I heard a soft sound behind me. I turned around to see Liza returning to the living room, still in her heels and sapphire necklace. But now, the only other thing she wore was a matching ankle bracelet, and nothing else. If I had been holding a drink, I would have dropped it. "So, David, tell me." Her voice was seductive as she slowly twirled. "Do you find this artwork more impressive than anything you've seen on canvas or in marble?" I stood there, completely stunned, utterly mesmerized by what I saw. In my mind, there wasn't a shred of doubt. Lisa had the most captivating figure I had ever seen, whether in person or on screen. She stood confidently, one leg in front, knees slightly bent, her hands firmly resting on her hips. A playful smile danced on her lips. "So, what do you think of my creation?" she asked. "Better than anything you'd find in a gallery, right?" I managed to mumble something like, "Definitely," but I wasn't sure exactly what I said, as my thoughts were swirling wildly in my head. One thing was certain: this was more thrilling than anything I had ever experienced. As Lisa moved closer, her smile became even more self-assured, as if she was fully aware of the effect she was having on me. "So, you really like what you see, don't you? A true art connoisseur," she teased, laughing softly. I wish I could explain exactly what happened next or what was going through my head at that moment. Was it pure desire? I can't say if Margaret came to mind or why I hadn't answered her calls. I didn't think about Tom either. I simply didn't think. All I know is that I stood up and began undressing, never taking my eyes off Lisa, who at that moment was the most mesmerizing sight I had ever seen. I helped her settle on the couch, then gently leaned over her. It quickly became clear that Lisa took her Kegel exercises seriously. After we caught our breath, we moved to the bedroom, though the night was restless. By 9 o'clock the next morning, we were having breakfast, blueberry pancakes and sausage pie, prepared by Lisa. As I ate, my mind slowly cleared from the fog of the previous night, and I started to wonder why Margaret hadn't called me back. It dawned on me how lucky Tom was to have such a woman by his side, though he didn't seem to realize her worth. And I had just experienced the most vivid night of my life with a woman I had once underestimated. If I didn't have a meeting at noon and the need to change out of my tuxedo, I might have stayed longer. "Liza, how about dinner tonight?" I asked as I got up from the table. "We need to talk about something." My appetite was satisfied, as was everything else. "I can make dinner here," she offered with a warm smile. "Let me take you out somewhere," I replied. "Are you free tonight?" She laughed. "You've caught me. I have a flexible schedule, so I'm taking the day off." "Great. How about 7 o'clock? I'll pick you up," I suggested. She laughed again. "I hope you're planning to stay the night." "That's what we need to discuss," I said with a smile. Around 11:55 a.m., just before my meeting started, Margaret finally called. I told her I couldn't talk at that moment and didn't ask why she hadn't called me back the night before, which seemed to put her at ease. I asked her to call me later. Despite the lack of sleep, I had an excellent meeting. Maybe it was the residual adrenaline and endorphins from the night before. By 5 in the evening, I had successfully brought both sides to an agreement. I even managed to take a hot shower and a quick nap before heading to pick up Lisa. When I arrived, she was wearing a yellow summer dress that seemed custom-made for her. She was in high spirits, wrapping her arm around my shoulder as we walked to the car. When we got to the restaurant, she chuckled quietly. Over dinner, we avoided discussing art. Instead, I was captivated by her knowledge of music, tennis, and hockey. She shared that she had been a violin prodigy as a child, but her career was cut short after a serious injury during a girls' hockey game in her teenage years. After her recovery, she learned to play the piano, but decided not to pursue music as a career. Instead, she got involved in event planning in college, where she thrived. When we returned to her place, she held my hand tightly as I walked her to the door. "We still have a lot to talk about," she said, smiling. Then, laughing, she added, "Come into the living room." Once inside, she sat next to me on the couch and took my hands in hers. "David, I need to confess something. I lured you in. I had wanted this for a long time, but the right moment only came last night. I'll be honest. I want Tom out of our lives, and I want you, especially after what happened between us. No one has ever made me feel what I felt with you." Once again, she left me speechless. My emotions had shifted 180 degrees in just one day, and I wasn't sure if my feelings for her were real or just fleeting passion, but I wanted to find out. "Can you take tomorrow off?" I asked. She smiled playfully. "If you want me to, I will." We agreed to spend the whole day together to see if we were truly compatible. That night, we made love again, spending hours discovering new depths in each other, experiencing sensations we never knew existed. By Friday afternoon, we were rehearsing for a concert, and it became clear just how much more musically talented Lisa was than me. She was a true natural star. Meanwhile, my phone remained silent. No calls from Margaret. When Lisa and I finally parted that evening, I told her, "I have a lot to think about." "And you?" I asked, assuming she would have her own doubts. But she just laughed quietly. "Honestly, I have nothing to think about. I'm just waiting for you to decide." I went home Friday night and Margaret was already there. Her face was hard to read, a mix of deep contemplation, uncertainty, and maybe a hint of fear. "Where have you been? What's going on?" she asked. "I was with Lisa," I said. "I think she's going to leave Tom." "Did you talk to her about it?" "Yes, but I haven't heard much about your trip. How did it go?" "Oh, it went fine. Very intense, but we sealed the deal we wanted. Brad will be pleased," she replied with a small, tired smile. "But we probably need to talk about a few things." "You're right," I agreed, "but maybe we can do that tomorrow." That night, we kept things simple. We had dinner and watched a movie, and later, when we went to bed, we made love with a passion I hadn't felt in a long time. The difference between what I felt with Margaret and what I felt with Lisa was striking. The next morning, I went for a long bike ride while Margaret went to her fitness class. Later, after lunch, we finally sat down to talk. "Something happened while I was away," she began. "Yeah, I figured," I said, trying to ease the tension with a laugh. The next 6 months were tough, but it only brought Lisa and me closer. Both Margaret and Tom seemed stuck in a cycle of trying to rebuild their marriages while also contemplating their end. Eventually, Lisa and I freed ourselves from all that uncertainty by renting a house together. 3 months later, we moved in. Once the divorces were finalized and Margaret and Tom bought out our shares of the homes, Lisa and I bought a place of our own. Soon after, we got married. But Margaret's life didn't improve. A year later, John left her, breaking her heart. Now, 4 years later, I still feel like I'm living in a dream. Every night I fall asleep next to an incredible, vibrant woman who feels like a masterpiece to me. I couldn't be happier. Perhaps if Margaret hadn't confessed to her affair with John, I wouldn't have dared to admit that I had also cheated on her with Lisa. But Margaret already knew it had happened. As Lisa later told me, Margaret had planned our meeting alone together and was going to leave me anyway. But that doesn't matter now. I'm happy to have a woman like Lisa by my side. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I can't pinpoint the exact moment it all began, but I wasn't completely in the dark. 14 years together gives you a sense of the subtle shifts. With Amelia, it started off quietly. She began to drift, little by little. First, she skipped our usual Friday dinners. Then she started forgetting minor things, like how I took my coffee or her "I love you" became less certain. At first, I shrugged it off as just life. People hit rough patches, work gets overwhelming, and, if I'm being honest, I hadn't been the most attentive husband either. But soon, the changes were impossible to brush aside. Late nights became her new routine, always explained away by work obligations or client meetings that ran over. I tried to rationalize it at first, but it wasn't her schedule that truly got to me. It was the phone. She was glued to it constantly. The second it chimed, she was on it, swiping before I could even ask who it was. When I'd walk in and catch her messaging someone, she wouldn't even try to hide her discomfort. Her eyes would barely meet mine before she quickly hid the phone beneath her or left the room. I chose to ignore it, telling myself over and over that I was just imagining things. But that uneasy feeling in my gut kept growing stronger. Every time she smiled at her screen, staying on it a bit too long, the knot in my stomach tightened. One evening she slipped up. She left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter, its screen glowing with a notification. I knew right then that everything was about to change. My hands shook as I picked it up, scrolling through her messages while she was upstairs, oblivious. It didn't take long to confirm my worst fears. The evidence wasn't hidden deep in her conversations. It was right there, glaringly obvious, as if she thought I'd never look. There they were, Tom, Jake, Rick. The same guys I spent weekends with, laughing, building memories, trusting. Now their messages to my wife stared back at me, vulgar and explicit. Tom's were the worst, arrogant and shameless. He bragged about their encounters, acting as though he'd taken something of mine without a second thought. "Can't wait for Thursday. Last time was insane. Didn't think you could handle all of us." That was Tom, cocky as ever. Jake's tone was just as casual, like this was normal for them. "I've got dibs on the backyard this time," as if they were picking seats at a dinner table. And Rick? He didn't even use words. Just sent a picture of his junk, like some clueless teenager. I stood there, frozen, the phone in my hand, my chest tight with every breath. A part of me desperately searched for some kind of explanation, something that would make this all a bad misunderstanding. But the more I read, the worse it got. Amelia wasn't some bystander in this. She was in the thick of it, encouraging them, teasing them. "Miss you guys. Can't wait to feel you again," she had written. This wasn't happening in some distant place. It was right here, in our home, in our bed. I couldn't keep reading. It was too much to bear. But I didn't explode. I didn't throw the phone or scream. That's not how I handle things when my world falls apart. Instead, the rage came slowly, creeping through me like ice. It moved up my spine, spread through my limbs until it filled every muscle, every breath. But the colder that anger became, the clearer my thoughts were. I didn't want a chaotic outburst of revenge. No, I wanted something deliberate, something planned. After all, I wasn't the one who had destroyed us. I never asked for those scumbags to force their way into my life, to invade my marriage. But now, they were going to pay for their arrogance. That was when the plan fell into place, cold, calculated, and flawless. The night after, Amelia casually mentioned a late dinner with some clients. I did what I always did. Gave her a kiss on the cheek, pretending like nothing was wrong, and told her I'd be spending the night at a friend's place. Of course, it was all a lie. The moment she left, I made my way to the garage. There it was, industrial-strength glue I had bought long ago for a project I never got around to. Now, it would have a far more creative use. I carried the glue upstairs, making sure to move with purpose, ensuring that nothing would seem out of the ordinary. My first task was setting up the cameras. I wasn't about to miss a single detail. Carefully, I positioned the cameras around the bed, making sure they captured every angle. Soon, I'd have all the evidence I needed, even if they were blissfully unaware. Then came the glue. I worked methodically, spreading the thick adhesive along the bed frame, under the sheets, and across the headboard. As I applied it, I imagined their smug faces, how they'd look when they realized what was happening. The idea of them stuck in the middle of their disgusting act, panicked and exposed, made me almost chuckle. They'd be trapped, unable to move. The following night, I sat in my car, parked just down the street. My engine was off, the only sound being my steady, shallow breathing. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. But I wasn't going to lose control. Not now. Patience. I had waited too long for this moment to make a mistake. Right at 10 p.m., I saw the headlights. Tom's old rust bucket pulled into the driveway just like every other time. A few minutes later, Jake and Rick arrived, as casual as ever. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The three of them swaggered up to my front door, laughing like they were untouchable, as if they owned the place. They walked inside with no hesitation, completely unaware that tonight would be very different. They had no idea they were stepping into a carefully laid trap. I took a deep breath, calming myself, and then slipped out of the car, moving quietly up the driveway, my eyes locked on the front door. The downstairs lights were off, just as I expected. Everything was happening upstairs. I entered the house as silently as a shadow, the only sound being the faint moans and grunts drifting down from the bedroom. I knew what I would find, but hearing it with my own ears made my stomach churn. Their noises of pleasure felt like daggers twisting in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Step by step, I crept up the stairs, silent and deliberate. The door to the bedroom was open just enough for me to see what was happening. My heart raced as I took in the scene. There was Amelia, my wife, being degraded in the worst way imaginable. It was obscene, but this wasn't some twisted fantasy. This was my reality. It was happening in my house, my home. Fury boiled up inside me, my vision blurred with red. Every part of me screamed to burst through the door and end it right then and there. But I didn't. I held back. I wasn't prepared for what was coming. Not yet. Instead, I turned back toward the hallway, where the bucket I had left waited, mocking me in its stillness. I had witnessed more than enough. Far too much. The bucket, which had seemed light before, now felt like a heavy weight in my grasp, dragging me down with it. With deliberate, silent steps, I made my way toward the door, my boots barely brushing the hardwood floor. Their sounds reached me, laughter mixed with moans, the kind of noise that haunts your mind, refusing to let go, like a song you can't stop hearing. I didn't give myself time to hesitate. My hand gripped the door handle, and with one firm motion I shoved it open. "What the hell?" was all Tom could get out before the bucket's contents exploded into the room. A thick, sticky substance sprayed everywhere, smacking into their tangled bodies and silencing them instantly. Chaos erupted, like a bomb had gone off, turning the scene into pure pandemonium. Amelia let out a muffled, panicked scream as she twisted in the mess, but it was too late. The glue had already started to harden, trapping her along with the three fools she had chosen to humiliate herself with in their depraved positions. Tom's face twisted from shock to pure terror. "Michael, you son of a—" Jake, his voice filled with frustration, cursed through clenched teeth as he tried to pull himself away from Amelia. But the glue was relentless, too quick, far too quick. The harder they fought, the worse it became. "Damn it! I can't! I'm stuck!" Tom was thrashing wildly, but it didn't make a difference. He was glued in place, trapped inside her like he had been welded there. Jake wasn't faring any better. His teeth gritted as he tried in vain to pry his own body free. Rick? Rick was in the worst position of all. "Jesus Christ!" Jake shouted. "What the hell did you do, man?" I just stood there, arms crossed, unfazed by their panic. Their naked bodies writhed and flailed, every movement entangling them further in the glue's grip. Tom grunted, sweat dripping down his forehead as he fought with all his strength to break free. Amelia's wide, frantic eyes met mine. She gagged again on Rick's banana still lodged in her throat, a muffled cry escaping her lips. Her hair, once neatly styled, was now stuck in clumps to the bed, glued to her back. The pristine image she once presented had crumbled into a grotesque disaster. I remained motionless, arms folded, feeling an odd sense of release, as though a burden I had carried for too long had finally lifted from my shoulders. They continued to struggle, but it was futile. Tom's face turned a deep shade of red, veins bulging as he strained against his restraints. Jake, still muttering in disbelief, gasped, "This isn't what it looks like." As if that even mattered at this point. Rick stared at me, wide-eyed, frozen in shock, like a deer caught in headlights. I had always thought he was smarter than this. Clearly I had been wrong, but it wasn't about them. Amelia was the one who mattered. Her wide, terrified eyes darted between me and the others, her face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come at first. I didn't care what she had to say. A cold satisfaction settled deep in my chest, like ice spreading through dark water. "You bastard!" she finally managed to choke out, her voice weak as she squirmed against the glue that had her naked and vulnerable on the bed. I just stared, watching her drown in her own helplessness. "Michael, please, let us go," she pleaded, her voice shaking now, thick with fear. But I didn't even acknowledge her. I calmly pulled out my phone, her desperate words falling on deaf ears as if they meant nothing at all. The moment her treachery came to light, it was as if a bomb had detonated, chaos and destruction in its wake. But now, all of it felt distant, like static in the background. The monotonous sound of the dial tone droned in my ear, and for a second I hoped none of the wives would pick up. Maybe Lisa, who had always been emotionally aloof, would let it go to voicemail. When the line connected, I said her name, flat and devoid of any emotion. No pretense, no warmth. "Mandy," I said, my voice cold. "You need to come over." "Michael, what's happening?" Her confusion was clear. She had no clue what was in store. Tom must have kept her in the dark about tonight. "Just come. Tom's here. You're going to want to see this." I didn't wait for her to ask the inevitable flood of questions. I hung up and dialed the next number. Amelia picked up, her voice immediately filled with panic. "Michael, what are you doing?" she begged. But I was unshaken, more composed than I had been in a long time. I finally had the advantage. "Lisa, Jake's at my place," I said, my voice eerily calm. "If he means anything to you, show up now." By the time I made my way to Karen's number, the scene upstairs had turned into something absurd. Tangled limbs, sweat-drenched and frantic, they were still trying to pull themselves apart. They thought they could talk their way out of it. Idiots. I made my last call and slid the phone into my pocket, taking a moment to watch the spectacle they had become. "That's it?" Rick rasped, his voice cracking. "You're just going to stand there and call our wives like some kind of lunatic?" "Exactly," I said without hesitation. They hadn't yet grasped what was about to unfold, but that didn't concern me. They would soon. I went downstairs and waited, each tick of the clock marking the countdown to their ruin. It didn't take long. Within 15 minutes of the calls, I heard the screech of tires pulling up outside. First Mandy, then Lisa. Karen wouldn't be far behind. Their footsteps pounded through the house, voices rising in confusion. "Michael?" Mandy's voice echoed down the hall. "Where are you?" I didn't move. They would find their way. Upstairs, where everything had already gone to hell. I listened as they climbed the stairs, one after the other. I didn't make a sound. This was their scene now. The silence that followed once they reached the top floor was suffocating. I could see it in my mind like a warped photograph. Their bodies a tangled mess on the bed, a grotesque tableau of deceit. Then the shouting began. "What the hell is this? Oh my God!" Lisa's voice sliced through the tension, her rage focused entirely on Jake. "You moron! How could you do this?" But Mandy was the first to act. She stormed toward Tom, her face contorted with fury. Her hand came down hard, the slap reverberating through the room, leaving a fiery red mark on his cheek. Tom tried to speak, his mouth moving but producing nothing more than gasps. "You worthless piece of trash," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "You didn't just betray me, you did it with her." Amelia, still trapped on the bed, whimpered in response. Her wide eyes were full of silent pleas, as if begging for some way out of this horrific scene, out from under the judgment of three men who had once thought they knew her. Lisa's mouth was occupied, but an apology was far from her thoughts. She stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock as they fixed on Jake, catching him red-handed in the moment. "Jake? Seriously? You absolute piece of trash," she spat. Lisa, Jake fumbled, struggling to find any coherent words. "You don't know? Is that what you're going to say?" she interrupted sharply, her voice heavy with scorn. "You seem to know exactly what you're doing, plastered to that filth." Jake, completely exposed, looked as if he wanted to melt into the floor, but there was no escape. He was frozen, utterly defenseless. Karen stormed forward next, her cheeks wet with tears but her fists clenched, filled with anger. She lashed out, landing a punch squarely on Rick's chest, close to where Mandy had already slapped him. It wasn't a powerful hit, but Rick still groaned, his body jerking, pulling Amelia awkwardly with him. "Damn you, Rick," Karen sobbed, her voice breaking apart. "After everything we've been through, this is how you repay me?" Rick barely managed a pitiful, "I'm sorry, babe." Chaos erupted all around them. The room buzzed with screams, sobbing, accusations, and insults hurled like weapons. Their betrayal was exposed, literally. And my unfaithful wife? She didn't even have the decency to say sorry. Her tear-streaked, swollen face only made her look more pitiful. Rick stayed glued to her, silencing her with his lips for once. But even if she could speak, I doubted it would be the apology I needed to hear. I stood there, arms folded, watching the mess unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Amelia squirmed, desperate for someone, maybe me, to step in and rescue her. Her gaze kept flicking toward me, but I wasn't about to be her savior. She could stay stuck for all I cared. Lisa's face twisted with fury, her words like venomous darts. "You filthy pigs! I gave you everything, and you're throwing it all away for this?" Jake kept his eyes down, mumbling half-hearted apologies, his words barely forming, but Lisa was done. "Shut up, Jake!" she barked, tearing the bedsheet off, as if stripping it would somehow erase the repulsive scene before her. Karen, meanwhile, was still screaming between her sobs, her fists pounding against Rick's back. "I hate you! You were supposed to love me!" "I do, Karen," Rick pleaded, his voice dripping with desperation. "Please, just let me explain." His body was still hunched awkwardly, pinning Amelia beneath him, unable to move. Mandy, pacing furiously, shot me a glare, her rage palpable. "How long have you known?" she demanded. "Long enough," I responded coolly, locking eyes with her before glancing at Amelia, who was now sobbing uncontrollably. "They're disgusting," Mandy muttered, her words soaked in revulsion. I gave a small nod. No argument from me. Suddenly, Lisa stormed over to the nightstand, grabbed the lamp and smashed it on the floor, sending glass shards flying. Jake flinched, probably bracing himself for the next blow. "You never deserved me," she hissed, her eyes burning with fury. Then she turned to me. Michael, what are you going to do about this? With calm indifference, I shrugged and pulled out my phone. This, I said. I held up the phone, showing the recording I had started earlier. The flash reflected off Rick's tear-streaked face, his expression twisted in despair. Please, Michael, he begged. Tom, still cowering in the corner like a beaten animal, whimpered pathetically. Shut up. For the first time in what seemed like forever, my voice was steady, calm, even. It felt like mine again. She made her choice, I said, motioning towards Amelia with my phone. They all did. She shook her head frantically, but all it did was smear more of Rick's grime across her tear-streaked face. Her sobs were muffled now, which was honestly a welcome change. The pitiful excuses from the men were grating enough without her adding to the noise. Mandy's face twisted with disgust as she stared at Tom. I'm divorcing you, she snarled, her voice sharp and final. You're worthless! Nearby, Lisa kicked a chair out of her way, the screech of metal on the floor piercing through the room's thick tension. You'll burn for this, Jake, Karen spat, her tears drying up, replaced by a fury that cut through the remaining grief. She wiped her face, her voice now icy. You were never enough for me, Rick, she hissed, locking eyes with him. I see that now. I kept my distance, recording everything. There was no need to get any closer. The camera was capturing it all. The chaos, the tears, the desperate glances, and the feeble excuses drenched in self-pity. Amelia's terrified eyes met mine through the lens, silently begging for something. Mercy, maybe. Her lips moved, trying to form words, but they were swallowed by the weight of her guilt. For the past 10 minutes she had been repeating the same lines. I'm sorry, I love you. It was a mistake. But none of it was meant for me. Her tears weren't for the wreckage she had left in our lives, in our marriage, in the years we had shared. She was crying because she had been exposed. There was no hiding anymore. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. As the wives unleashed their fury, Mandy gripped Tom's hair with both hands, pulling hard. Lisa was lashing out at Jake, knocking over whatever she could reach in her rage. Karen's fists struck Rick, not hard enough to hurt him, but just enough to make him wince with each blow. Not one of them spared a glance at Amelia. She was exactly where she belonged. I took a step back. I had seen all I needed to see. The anger that had been boiling inside me for days was finally starting to cool. The worst part was over. It was time to leave. A sense of calm washed over me. I was done. Before I turned to go, I glanced back one last time at the mayhem behind me. Mandy ripping into Tom, Lisa in a fury, Karen still crying but resolute, and that hideous tangle of bodies on the bed, pieces of a nightmare I had finally pieced together. I descended the stairs, the shouting and chaos fading with every step, the weight on my chest growing lighter. By the time I reached the door, the cool night air hit me, and I took a long, deep breath. Outside, I got into my car and sat there for a moment. I glanced up at the house, at the nightmare it had become, and then I drove away. I didn't look back, not even once. The next morning I filed for divorce without hesitation. When I laid out the evidence for my lawyer, photos, videos, every sordid detail, his face went pale. Michael, this is extensive, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I just shrugged. It was necessary. The divorce process was swift, brutal, and clean. Amelia didn't contest it. She couldn't. The evidence was irrefutable. In the end, she left with nothing. No home, no money, just the clothes on her back and the consequences of her choices. As for Tom, Jake, and Rick, their marriages went up in flames just as quickly. Mandy, Lisa, and Karen didn't waste a moment filing for divorce, severing all ties without a second thought. Last I heard, the men were living out of their cars, pariahs in a town that couldn't stop buzzing with gossip. Their lives were ruined, their reputations shattered. Our small town couldn't stop talking about it. Everywhere I went, people stared, their hushed voices trailing me like an unwanted companion. Did you hear about Michael's wife? Amelia? I never thought she'd sink so low. Those men should be ashamed of themselves. Their gossip lingered in the air, but I held my head high, refusing to let their words affect me. Let them talk. I had no reason to feel ashamed. Amelia had tried to reach out a few times, but I blocked her number without hesitation. One day she showed up at my door. Her face was streaked with mascara, tears streaming down as she pleaded for forgiveness. Without a second thought, I shut the door in her face. A week later, I was quietly enjoying a drink at the local bar when Tom, Jake, and Rick stormed in, their expressions twisted with fury as they made a beeline toward me. "You bastard!" Tom hissed, leaning in close. "You've ruined our lives." I calmly sipped my whiskey, unbothered. "Seems like you managed that yourselves when you all decided to sleep with my wife." Jake slammed his hand on the bar. "We deserve compensation for that glue stunt you pulled." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is that right?" Rick puffed out his chest, trying to look menacing. "Yeah, you either pay up or we're pressing charges. Assault, unlawful imprisonment, you name it," Tom added, his voice sharp with frustration. I couldn't help but chuckle at their pathetic attempt to scare me. "By all means," I replied, staring them down. "File those charges, I dare you, but don't forget I still have those videos. One click, and the whole internet will be watching your sorry asses. You'll be celebrities worldwide." Their faces drained of color. Tom opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. "That's what I thought," I said, turning back to my drink. "Now get the hell out of here." They left, defeated, their bravado evaporated. I never saw them again. In the weeks that followed, the weight of Amelia's betrayal and the anger toward my so-called friends lifted. I sold the house, packed up my life, and decided it was time for a fresh start in a new place. On the day I left, I drove past the spots that once held meaning for us. The park where we had our first date, the restaurant where I proposed. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. When the words slipped from her lips, "Honey, we need to talk," Luke's knees buckled, and he sank to the floor. When he regained his composure, she continued, "You know I love you," delivering the blow he feared most. He realized that the dreaded plan was already in motion. "I'll be right back, sweetheart," he said, heading toward the door. "I just need to grab something from the car," he added over his shoulder. Luke didn't respond, and returned a moment later with a box wrapped in paper and an envelope. "What's this?" Abigail asked with a touch of curiosity in her voice. "You'll see soon, Abigail. Just wait a bit. I need to finish something." He went out again, leaving her alone with the box. Unable to resist, she opened the envelope and recognized his handwriting. It was a congratulatory card, which puzzled her. Her birthday was still a while away. Why now? The card's cover held a sweet, romantic inscription, but inside was something even more unexpected, a personal note from Luke. "I thought you might wear what's in the box for your date with Alexander on Friday night. Luke." Abigail's heart froze. He knew. She tried to gather her thoughts, reminding herself she had planned to tell Luke about Alexander that evening. It was all intended to spark his jealousy, to rekindle his interest in her. For too long, his focus had been consumed by work, leaving her feeling invisible. She wanted him to start caring again. She opened the gift box and gasped at what lay inside. An emerald and diamond necklace she had admired months ago. He must have been buying it in secret, paying it off in installments. A wave of guilt washed over her, followed by anxiety. What had she done? She rushed to the door, hoping to find him, but his car was gone. In a panic, Abigail called Alexander, canceling their plans. "My husband knows," she said, her voice shaking. "So what?" "You were going to tell him, weren't you?" Alexander replied, showing no concern. "Come on, Abigail. You've been dragging me along for weeks. You at least owe me a date. What's the problem?" "Incredible!" she snapped. "We're done." "Fine," he replied coldly. "I'll find someone with more spark and maybe a better look. Remember, you were the one begging me to get involved." She ended the call, shocked and stunned by his parting words. Sinking onto the couch, she felt a surge of anxiety, clutching the box with the necklace. She had no idea what this meant for their marriage. 20 years together, 2 children. They had built a life. He wouldn't just leave, would he? He'd come back. He had to come back. Pouring herself a glass of wine, she sat in the silence of the house, relieved that the children were already asleep. When morning light crept into the room, Abigail awoke on the couch, still holding the necklace box. Luke hadn't returned. She hurried upstairs, calling his name as she approached the bedroom. The bed was untouched, still neatly made. And then, at the end of the hall, her daughter appeared, looking at her mother in surprise. "Mom, are you wearing the same clothes as yesterday? What's going on?" Barrett, Abigail's 16-year-old daughter, had been waiting to talk for a while. It was time to clear the air. "Barrett, I must have fallen asleep on the couch. I just woke up. Seems like I had a bit too much wine, knocking me out like that." Realizing she was running late, Abigail hurried to get ready for work. "Is my dad downstairs? I need to go over the updated soccer schedule with him. The junior team's game was canceled, so the seniors are playing earlier. I really hope he can make it." Barrett looked slightly uncertain and admitted, "It's my first time playing as goalkeeper. It's kind of exciting." Abigail encouraged her, saying, "Your dad was called away for an urgent matter late last night, but I'll be sure to let him know about the schedule change. You know how much he hates missing your games, Barrett. If he can, he'll be there," she reassured her. Just then, her younger son Brady came out of his room looking downcast. "Good morning, Brady," Abigail greeted him warmly. Head down, he mumbled, "Yeah, whatever." After a brief hesitation, he added, "Dad's not here?" Abigail replied carefully, "Yes, he had to leave suddenly for work, but he'll be back soon." Brady looked disappointed but held back his tears as he headed downstairs. Abigail managed to get to work only a few minutes late, but she felt nervous, fearing someone might notice. She tried to brush off her anxious thoughts, muttering a goodbye to herself as she began going over messages from her secretary, Lynn. She skimmed through them, hoping to see at least one from her husband, Luke, but found none. Breaking the silence, Lynn remarked, "Something's off with that Alexander. He got rude and started swearing when I told him you weren't in yet." Abigail sighed. "He's awful, Lynn. If he calls again, just hang up. Sorry you had to deal with him." This incident left her feeling uneasy, a creeping worry that her secret could be exposed. Throughout the morning, her work suffered as her mind kept drifting back to this. Finally, she couldn't resist any longer and called Luke's office. His cheerful secretary, Barbara, answered. "Hi, Abigail. How can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with my husband," she said, but Barbara hesitated, surprised. "I thought he was with you. He took the day off for personal reasons. We all assumed he was with you, especially after he gave you that anniversary gift yesterday. He did give it to you, right?" Abigail was caught off guard. "Yes, he did. But how did you know about it?" Barbara laughed. "Oh, come on. We all got curious when Luke started taking overtime shifts. Some even joked it was either a secret girlfriend or gambling debts. But one morning he walked in with that necklace, absolutely beaming. I actually teared up when I saw it. It was stunning. All the women gathered around, admiring it." Barbara added jokingly, "By the way, some of us have already claimed Luke if you ever let him go. But I told them nobody would part with a man who gives such gifts. How did you react when you saw it?" Abigail kept her tone steady, hiding her true feelings. "I was stunned." "So what's the reason for your call?" Barbara teased good-naturedly. "Oh, nothing," Abigail replied quickly, pulling herself together. "I remembered where he is. Bye." In truth, she had no idea where Luke was, and a growing sense of worry began to unsettle her, making her wonder what he might be up to. Abigail logged into their shared accounts, nervously watching the screen. A recent withdrawal of $1,000 immediately caught her eye, providing some relief. She had feared seeing the balance wiped out or a large sum suddenly missing. It was a slight comfort, although she still had no idea how he would actually respond. The thought of calling every divorce attorney in the city was overwhelming, given the sheer number of options. Her mind was scattered until an email from Luke appeared in her work inbox. Her heart pounded as she opened it, feeling anxious. "Abigail," he began, "I was devastated to hear that you might be seeing someone named Alexander. I had just bought you a card and a necklace." Luke continued, "I've made a decision. You have a choice. You can admit that this was a mistake and end things with Alexander, or stay with him while still being my wife. Judging by your actions, you've chosen the latter, and it broke my heart. You should know that every bit of overtime I took on was to save up for that necklace you wanted. If I'd known that necklace would cost me our marriage, I would have done things differently. I didn't expect you to give up so quickly. After nearly 20 years of marriage, it's clear we don't know each other as well as I thought. But one thing I was sure of, you were always my priority. That hasn't changed, even now. So I'll yield. You're free to be with whomever you choose, and I won't stand in the way. I'm leaving, and while I won't sign the divorce papers, I won't fight it if you decide to go through with it. Keep the necklace. I can't take it back, as I'd hoped it would symbolize our future together. Let it be my last gift of love. He went on. I also left a note for our children, explaining why I'm leaving. Leaving them is harder than leaving you. But I know that your new partner will have to take on the role in the family we built together. My presence would only complicate things for them. I tried to convey my love and reasons, though I regret any pain this causes them. Perhaps therapy will help them cope. I trust your new partner has the means to assume my financial responsibilities. I withdrew only $1,000, knowing you'd need time to adapt financially to my absence. Now I'm leaving. I hope everything goes as you planned. Luke. Shaken by his words, Abigail took the rest of the day off to prepare for the difficult conversation she knew awaited her with the children. A tight knot of anxiety formed in her stomach. When Barrett and Brady came home, they were surprised to see her car already there. They exchanged wary glances, sensing something was wrong. "Is this about Dad?" they asked. "Did you see his message?" she asked in return. They hadn't. They had just come in. "Is Dad okay? Is he sick?" they asked with concern. "No, it's not that," she reassured them. "Please read his message. Then come here and we'll talk." The children went upstairs, and Brady joined Barrett as she read the message. A few minutes later, they returned to the living room. Barrett was fuming with anger, while Brady was barely holding back tears. Abigail took a deep breath to steady herself and asked, "Do you have any questions?" Barrett's voice was sharp. "When is your boyfriend moving in?" "There is no boyfriend," Abigail replied, her voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake and no one is moving in. All I want is to convince your father to come back." Abigail struggled to calm Brady. "Brady, it's not your fault," she assured him. Brady lowered his head. "It is my fault. I told Dad about you and Alexander." Abigail felt her heart stop. How did you even find out?" Brady sighed heavily and turned away. "I've always liked messing around with tech, and I figured out how to connect to your phone. I recorded some of your conversations, but Dad found those recordings." Abigail turned pale. "Did he listen to them?" Brady nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "He listened to every conversation between you and Alexander. I've never seen him so broken. He made me swear to keep it all a secret. I'm really sorry." His voice trembled, and he began to sob. In that moment, Abigail understood everything. She now knew how Luke had found out about her relationship with Alexander. Weeks passed, turning into months. After 6 months, grim news arrived. Luke's car had been found crashed and abandoned. Inside the car's glove compartment lay a wallet with untouched cash, documents, and credit cards. At that moment, Abigail realized that the strange charges on the credit card now made sense. But Luke was gone, presumed to be the victim of a failed carjacking. The police concluded he had likely died, though his body was never found. A year passed, and reluctantly, Abigail filed for divorce on the grounds of his disappearance to access Luke's remaining assets. It was a painful process, but she had no choice. With mounting bills, she took on extra work. Barrett and Brady resented the added responsibilities placed on them and constantly reminded her of it. Abigail completely avoided dating. A few men offered their support, but with conditions she wasn't ready to accept. As long as Luke's fate remained a mystery, she stayed alone. 2 years went by without a single trace, except for the abandoned, wrecked car left behind. The police distributed missing person bulletins in every area where his last credit card transactions had been recorded, but nothing surfaced. As Christmas approached, Abigail asked Barrett and Brady what they wanted for the holiday, even though she already knew the answer. They only wanted their father back. One evening, the phone rang, breaking the silence. On the line was an emergency room doctor who said he had treated a man with a distinctive scar. With a photographic memory, the doctor recognized the scar from a missing persons bulletin he'd seen years ago. He found the old flyer and reached out to Abigail, who, with a trembling voice, asked where this man was. "He's currently at a local homeless shelter," the doctor replied. Abigail's pulse quickened as she received the shelter's contact details and called its director. "Do you have a man named Luke Johnson?" she asked, holding her breath. The director replied, "No, I don't know anyone by that name." But when Abigail described Luke's appearance, he paused. "We have a man with amnesia. We call him the Wanderer. A farmer who once hired him gave him that name. He doesn't remember his real name or where he's from." Abigail felt a faint glimmer of hope. "Could you send me his photograph? We've been looking for him for 2 years." The director agreed, and soon Abigail received a photo of a tanned, unshaven man with rugged features. She studied it closely, hoping to see something familiar, and finally noticed enough of Luke's features to believe it could be him. She showed the photo to Barrett, who immediately recognized his father, and Brady nodded in agreement. Abigail began to prepare for Luke's return home. The director warned her that the man they called the Wanderer might refuse to leave with her. Determined to take action, Abigail asked her brother to accompany her on the trip. She needed someone reliable, someone who could handle the journey, and perhaps someone her husband might remember. On the road into the unknown, Abigail prayed silently for a long-awaited reunion, while her brother, gripping the wheel firmly, prayed that they would return safe and sound. After an exhausting trip that cut their initial 16-hour journey down to just 4, Abigail and her brother Rory finally arrived at the shelter. Entering, Abigail requested to meet with the director, who soon brought in the man they had come all this way to find. When he appeared, he looked at Abigail and Rory without a hint of recognition. Abigail stepped forward, extending her hand, but he recoiled, eyeing her warily. "Hey, easy there, lady," he said cautiously. "I haven't had women around me in a long time, and I'm not about to start with some stranger claiming I'm her long-lost love." "Luke, it's you. I'd know your voice anywhere," Abigail insisted. "You look different with long hair and a beard, but it's you. I'm Abigail, and this is Rory," she gestured to her brother. "Don't you remember us?" The man raised his eyebrows, looking back and forth between them. Abigail softly added, "The kids miss you so much. They've grown a lot since you left. They're waiting for you." She handed him a photo showing 2 children holding a sign that read, "Welcome home, Dad." Luke's gaze softened as he studied the picture, recognizing the resemblance. They really do look like us," he muttered. Looking back at Abigail, he asked, "So what's the story here? Why show up so suddenly?" Taking a deep breath, Abigail told him everything, about her failed relationship with Alexander, the regrets that haunted her, and how they eventually parted ways. She was honest and regretful about the past. He looked at her skeptically. "Let me get this straight. You're saying I just let you run off with another man, didn't put up a fight, didn't chase you? Then I left you and the kids, and now you're broken up with him?" He smirked. "Sounds like the final act. And what's my part in it?" Abigail's voice was firm but filled with emotion. "I need you. The kids need their father. We can start fresh. The divorce was only a financial decision. I never stopped loving you, even if I tried to make you jealous with Alexander. We still have a chance to be a family, if you come back." Rory turned to Luke. "Stop being so stubborn. Do the right thing, will you?" Luke looked at him angrily. "Listen, maybe the man I once was did the right thing by leaving. His only mistake was not teaching your Alexander a lesson. And what do I get if I come back?" Rory retorted, "Like you have something better here?" Abigail interjected, speaking softly. "Luke, come home. A warm home, good food, 2 amazing kids, and a wife who loves you are waiting for you." He scoffed. "And how am I supposed to make a living there?" Abigail thought for a moment. "You could try to get your old job back. I'll help cover expenses until you're settled." He tilted his head. "Will that cover a drink now and then?" "If that's what you need," she replied, unwavering. "All right, I'll give it a shot, but no promises," he said, as Rory rolled his eyes beside him. "I don't know, Abigail," Rory muttered doubtfully. "I'm not sure this is a good idea." "Trust me, Rory. I didn't come all this way to give up now. He'll come around, I'm sure." With that, they began the journey back home. After a while, they regretted not insisting he freshen up, so they stopped at a store to buy him clean clothes, then at a nearby gas station for him to shower. Afterward, the rest of the trip went more smoothly, though he stubbornly kept his beard, at least now it was clean. The man was weary of the constant questions, the unending reminders. "Do you remember this place?" Or, "Do you recall how we used to come here?" Eventually, he stopped answering, letting the words pass over him, paying them no attention. When he got out of the car, 2 children ran up to him and hugged him tightly. He held back, not responding to their embrace, but their joy was undiminished. They gathered around the kitchen table, eagerly waiting for him to tell his story. Asking for a cup of coffee, he began, "My life, as far as I can remember, started on an empty road, where I was wandering." He continued, recalling the confusion of that day. He remembered a bruise, a cut on his forehead, and dried blood running down half his face. Someone had noticed him, called for help, and soon a deputy sheriff arrived to take him to the hospital. He didn't know who he was, and he had no identification. The police ran his fingerprints, but there were no matches, and none of the missing persons reports fit his description. The sheriff speculated that he might have been robbed and left alone. Offering assistance, he suggested finding work at a ranch where they were always hiring and provided food and shelter. The job would at least allow him to afford a drink on the weekends. He started working there, though he wasn't particularly skilled in agriculture. He worked at the ranch for over 2 years. One day, while repairing a barbed wire fence, the wire snapped and wrapped around him. The ranch owner took him to the emergency room, handed him his last paycheck, and wished him well. Without a job once again, he found himself at the hospital, where a doctor noticed an old scar on his shoulder, a gunshot wound. When asked about it, he replied that he had no idea how he got it, explaining that he suffered from amnesia. The doctor recommended he seek help at a local homeless shelter. At the shelter, as he tried to figure out his next steps, the director took his photo and sent it to local authorities. Soon after, she received a call from a woman claiming to be his wife, who promised to come for him. Ironically, he mused that his wife might turn out to be young and wealthy. But to his surprise, the woman who arrived was indeed beautiful. She was accompanied by a man who introduced himself as her brother. They showed him a photo of 2 children. While he wanted to reconnect with them, he felt a strange detachment, uncertain if he was truly their father. He told the children he was there to see if any memories would return. "You're our dad, and we're not letting you go again," the children cried, hugging him once more. This time, he hugged them back wholeheartedly. Abigail, the woman who had brought him home, wiped her tears and led him upstairs to show him the bedroom. "It might be too soon to expect you to share a bed with me," she said gently. "Let's put your things in the guest room," she suggested. He replied, "It's been a long time since I've been with anyone. You're so beautiful that I want to be close to you. But if we were to be close right now, it would be just closeness, not love. If you're okay with that, then so be it." "Maybe in a few days," she said. "I want to be with my husband, not a stranger." Abigail would soon have to return to work, but she didn't want to leave him alone. She suggested he shave and visit his former workplace, but he wasn't ready for that step. As soon as Abigail and the children left, he felt a sense of release. The part of him that felt like Luke, along with the name he'd been using, also faded away. Mentally, he addressed that part of himself to Luke, who had led him along this path. "Almost everything we planned after that incident has come to pass," he thought. "I'm still angry that the car thief ran off with our money," he reflected. "But that's lost now." It all seemed almost surreal, the struggles he had overcome to make it here, to rediscover himself. He had tried everything except a simple call home, asking to be taken back. He'd gone through numerous doctors and spoken to the police more than once. Nearly a year had passed since we decided to return home before anyone finally realized we were back. At last, the time had come to put our plan for revenge against Abigail into action. You might have noticed how much the children have grown over the past years. I can't wait until we are fully part of their lives again. This man had taken on all the roles their father used to hold in the household. He attended the kids' school events, just as their father had. Gradually, he even began to respond naturally to the name Luke. He shaved his beard and even mentioned his former job, though he'd been offered a new position instead of the old one. He embraced the change willingly. Abigail seemed pleased with how things were progressing. One evening she went to Luke's room and said, "I'm ready. Later we can be together." She was surprised when he gently withdrew, choosing to end things then and there. It was as if life itself was reflected in a mirror. Everything seemed to fall back into its old, familiar rhythm. Thoughts of marriage soon emerged. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Luke sat down beside Abigail. "Abigail, we need to talk," he said softly. Her heart tightened, painfully reminded of the last words spoken more than 3 years ago. "These last few months have been incredible," he continued. "Being with the kids, being with you, it feels like coming home. You're an amazing mother, and they are wonderful children. But there's something I have to tell you. I fell for someone else at work," he confessed. "We've shared lunches, conversations, and we have a trip planned this weekend. Nothing has happened yet, but it will this weekend. I know this complicates things, but I hope we can remain friends, and I'd love to stay connected with the kids." Abigail covered her face with her hands, her sobs breaking the silence. "Why, God? Why must I pay so dearly for one mistake? Haven't I redeemed myself? Don't I deserve forgiveness?" Her tears went on for almost half an hour. Luke didn't try to comfort her. He waited, allowing her to let out her grief. When she finally quieted, he spoke again. "Abigail, I'm not God, but I think you've suffered enough. If you can forgive me for this final act of revenge, I want to come back as your husband and the father of our children." She looked at him bewildered. "You mean all of this was a setup? Some horrible revenge plot?" Her voice grew cold. "You are vile, heartless, and inhuman. You wanted me to feel the same way I did when you first confessed to cheating, is that it?" Luke's face shifted, his expression hardened. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly what I wanted. I wonder if you think I could go even further." Abigail's eyes narrowed. "And how do I know this isn't just the start of a new round of punishments?" Luke anticipated her doubt. He walked over to the Christmas tree and pulled out a small box, wrapped and prepared. "I thought you might wonder that. Here, an early Christmas gift." "You think I've forgiven you?" "No." He watched her with suspicion as she opened the box, finding an emerald necklace with diamonds she had once pawned to make ends meet after he left. Tears filled her eyes. "Abigail, I couldn't forgive you. Goodbye, now we're even, I'm leaving you." This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.